Good morning, Team Dominator members. This is a live emergency update as Tropical Storm Harold has made landfall in South Texas. There you can see the center. And the big concern now are these outer bands and the supercells that are in those outer bands. You can see a tornado warning for Beeville, Texas, and that storm has just exited Beeville, a little bit off to the north. And this definitely is a pretty dangerous situation out here across Texas. Let me see if I can zoom into this thing too here. And you can see those tornado warnings and the outer bands of Tropical Storm Harold definitely do have, there we go, getting a little zoomed in here to Beeville. And this is a classic tropical cyclone where usually the northern and also the northeastern, the front right quadrants relative to landfall. So this is moving east to west, and definitely these outer bands are the big concern. The mesocyclone is kind of on the east side of these storms. They pull in inflow from the northeast, and they move very rapidly as well. Very fast moving supercells. Thank you everybody for joining us. Welcome new Team Dominator members. And there you can see that circulation. That's a possible tornado right there. It's off to the northwest of Beeville. We can put this in motion and we'll see what happened in Beeville. It looks like that circulation went right to the north of Beeville, and just now it's starting to ramp up. So you can definitely see that velocity couplet start to tighten there. You can use some of the other products like correlation coefficient to see if that's lofting any debris. And I'm not seeing any debris right now with that, but a lot of times these tropical cyclones are relatively transient as well when they produce. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. Just doing a quick live emergency update here on the tornado potential with Harold that made landfall well to the south of Corpus Christi. Had maximum sustained winds of about 50 miles an hour, and it actually had a center reformation. So there's a lot of warm water here in the Gulf of Mexico, and a lot of times when these tropical cyclones are approaching South Texas, they'll spin up very rapidly and intensify. And even the weaker ones that are moving a little bit faster, like Harold, intensified at the last second and definitely wrapped in that inner core. You had a lot of latent heat release, a little bit of a pressure drop down to 1,000 millibars. And when it made landfall out here, a lot of blowing sand on the barrier islands. And now the threat is shifting to tornadoes. You can definitely see it's wrapping in that dry air right into the center, pulling in the dry air from northern Mexico, wrapping it around. And when this basically an effective elevated mix layer wraps in over top of the tropical cyclone, it can actually increase the chances of tornado potential. And it looks like we just had an extension of that tornado warning to the northwest of Beeville. Here, tornado warning for the next 45 minutes, and that includes Oakville. So Oakville, Texas, definitely get in your safe place. It's going to be in Oakville at around noon, 12:05 Central Daylight Time. And these tropical cyclone-induced storms are probably ripping at like 50 miles an hour, so they move very fast, a lot faster than your traditional tornado warnings. There's the circulation. There's Oakville right in the path, and this thing is definitely heading in that direction on the north side of the tropical cyclone, moving in an east to west direction. There's another tornado warning to the southwest of Goliad, north of Berclair. And that mesocyclone is a little bit more broad, but it definitely is trying to tighten up. You can see your classic supercell structure. You have an RFD right there too. Basically, your RFD wraps around the east side of that circulation, and still a classic supercell, but these tropical cyclone supercells are flip-flopped a little bit. Very similar to that May 12 tornado that we intercepted near Spalding, Nebraska, where on the north side of that closed low, those individual supercells are moving in an east to west direction, and the mesocyclone and the tornado is on the east side of these storms as they're moving east to west. Normally, the storms will move off to the southwest and northeast with traditional tornado setups with the prevailing westerlies, and usually the tornado is located on the south side. But with these tropical cyclone-induced tornadoes, where you have a lot of extreme wind shear, they definitely will move very rapidly, wrap up, pull in their inflow from the northeast, and you can see some of these other supercell structures embedded within the stratiform rain. There's one right there just to the northeast of Skidmore, and that one is also trying to organize, develop a little bit of a mesocyclone on the eastern side. There's another one that's just off Corpus Christi as well. Watch out for this one. Tornado potential, waterspout potential. That one just came in near Port Aransas, which was an area that was hammered by Hurricane Harvey, which was also a rapidly intensifying tropical cyclone, but it got up to a Category 4 just prior to landfall. near Rockport. Rockport at least had that damaging onshore flow. You can see Rockport just off to the north of this. But Corpus Christi now has flash flood warnings in effect. There's always flash flooding with these tropical systems because of the warm rain processes. And you can also start to see these feeder bands that are starting to train over the same areas, one after another. These also could have tornado potential as well. But flash flooding is definitely going to be the main effect here with Corpus Christi just getting blasted by big time rain, including warm rain processes. And we still have these supercells off to the north. It looks like outside of the main rain shield, you also have some other supercells that are trying to develop. And I think that these also could have some tornado potential. But a lot of times when you get these supercells that are embedded within the stratiform rain, you get a little bit of a shallow stable layer right at the surface. And it almost reduces the friction a little bit. And it seems like when those supercells move into these areas with a decoupled boundary layer, a lot of times they'll even increase their tornado potential. So Oakville, Texas, definitely getting your safe place. There you can see that couplet, and it's even tightening up further on approach to Oakville. So a pretty strong rotation right there. A likely tornado. Cloud bases are really low with these tropical cyclones too. So a lot of times they'll be pretty quick. And there's the debris. It looks like we got a confirmed tornado right there to the southwest of Normanna on the way to Oakville. So Oakville, getting your safe place. It does look like we've got a confirmed tornado now with this storm. It's right near the rotation. Possibly just some inflow induced leaves getting lofted out there potentially. But they definitely need the rain out here in Texas. Here's another one that's starting to intensify too. Let's take a look at what... Yeah, and it looks like this one's also trying to produce a tornado. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a tornado warning as well to the northwest of Corpus Christi. That's in rural terrain to this between Freer and George West, Texas. I know there's a Whataburger in George West. I had that Whataburger right after intercepting Hurricane Hannah, which was a Category 1 storm. So this came in as a tropical cyclone, and you can see these supercell structures out here. This one to the between Goliad and Berclair. You've also got the one that's confirmed that's approaching Oakville. And I think we're going to need a tornado warning out for that storm too, which is definitely, obviously it has tornado potential, a fairly strong mesocyclone as well. But this one is the most dangerous storm right now. Tornado in progress. You can see the mesocyclone here right on the east side of that supercell structure. And that is definitely heading off to the west-northwest toward Oakville and Three Rivers. So those are communities that are right in the path of that supercell storm, heading east to west. And this one also obviously has a tornado warning too. And you can see even on the reflectivity, you can see the RFD structure. You can see this little comma head on the backside. You have your forward flank downdraft right there as well. So this is your supercell storm. And it is textbook. But basically what you got is something like that. That's your supercell storm, and it's pulling in the inflow from the northeast. You also have your RFD gust front. You can even see a little bit of dry air trying to surge in with that RFD right behind it, almost like a bit of a wake low that's happening. So your tornado in this case is right about there, just behind that leading RFD gust front. And you can even see a bit of a weak echo region there as well. That mesocyclone is a bit more broad than this one, which is in progress, this tornado warning. And so let's look at the correlation coefficient. Just kind of a bird fart, but a fast moving bird fart tornado, definitely capable of producing some damage. So if you live in Oakville, Texas, it is time to get in your safe place. That supercell is moving off to the west very rapidly at about 50 miles an hour. So it's moving very fast. You can see it's relatively healthy too. And now we just got the tornado warning down to the southwest of George West as we were anticipating. That one does have a very strong mesocyclone. And it's moving off to the southwest. So you can almost see this one's moving a bit more like that. So keep an eye out on it in the Freer area, even though it should turn a little bit off to the right and move more of an east to west direction. Might turn right, but definitely looks like kind of the southern edge of that tornado warning is in the path of that tornado. It's going to pass to the north of Freer, largely over a rural terrain. You can see a lot of the big winds associated with the core of the tropical cyclone, which continues to move inland. And this could actually go around the southern periphery of that high pressure that's anchored in the southern U.S. and then lead to an uptick in the monsoon tomorrow across portions of Arizona too. A lot of times when these tropical systems come in over the southern edge though of that high. They have a little bit more dry air too, but this thing is intensifying. And it does look like it's headed right for Oakville, Texas. And look at that, we even have a lightning strike, which is actually pretty rare for these tropical cyclones because they don't have a lot of hail, they don't have a lot of graupel either. So it's actually pretty rare for these tropical cyclones to do this. But it does look like there is a tornado that's in progress right now. Moving off to the east. Or excuse me, from the east to the west. Oakville, get in your safe place. Definitely looks like a tornado in progress right now. So Oakville, definitely get in your safe place as that supercell is moving rapidly from the east to the west. There you can see the shape of that supercell storm that's approaching Oakville. Oakville, Three Rivers, Texas area, get in your safe place. That is a pretty dangerous supercell storm. And if you know anybody in this area, definitely share this stream, providing some updates with the tornado potential. Emergency update as we now have 3 tornado warnings in progress right now. We've got this one out near Goliad to the north of Berkeley. We've got this one that's likely a confirmed tornado that's heading toward Oakville, Three Rivers. And then we also have this one intensifying to the north of Freer that's moving more in a southwest direction. The southern edge of that tornado warning is definitely going to be the most dangerous portion of that storm. So this thing came in with 50-mile-an-hour sustained winds. We have a new flash flood warning well to the west of Corpus Christi, basically from Sandia, Orange Grove, all the way down to Concepcion. And I do think there could even be some debris flows out here once this thing starts to arrive in the Texas Hill Country, well to the south of San Antonio. There's a drought down in this area, so this is much needed rain. But a lot of times when these tropical systems move into these drought-stricken areas, they will lead to debris flows, big-time flash floods as well. But look at this one heading toward Oakville, pretty dangerous storm. I'm not seeing much in the way on the correlation coefficient now. You can see just a little bit of some low correlation values. So it is possible that that is a wispy tornado right there that's not able to loft any debris because of the terrain. And once it gets a little bit closer to Oakville, wouldn't be surprised if we see an uptick basically in that TDS, tornado debris signature. It does have a lot of storm relative inflow into it, and the couplet's gotten a little bit more broad on the last couple of scans. Thanks everybody for tuning into this live update. I should have flown out there, but I'm actually still out in San Diego right now. But the tropical cyclone just was a little bit on the weaker end, and I could have definitely chased the tornado potential. I do want to show you really quick what these tropical cyclones look like in terms of the wind shear and why a lot of these tornadoes are happening basically in the northern and eastern section of that tropical cyclone. So we're going to zoom in a little bit. You can also see a lot of surface-based instability out there. So we're going to look at the low-level wind shear of this tropical cyclone as it comes in. As we're tracking this tornado that's heading toward the Oakville area, Oakville, Three Rivers. But when you use the RAP analysis, you can definitely see exactly why the tornado potential is maximized on that front right quadrant. And that's just because the strongest low-level wind shear is located over there. It's all about the kinematics or the wind fields with these tropical cyclones. And there you can see the RAP analysis definitely shows the greatest wind shear in the northern portion of that tropical cyclone, basically the front right quadrant. So this one's moving off to the east, or moving from the east to the west. And so the front right quadrant is definitely starting to get the greatest wind shear. And you can definitely see that slug of 200 plus effective storm relative felicities. It's easier for these storms to be surface-based as well. And you can definitely see the feeder band coming in there. But that's why you have those tornado warnings right in that rain band that's associated with the greater wind shear. You look a little bit removed from that stratiform rain and you have a lot weaker low-level wind shear. Basically, this is an effective surface low that's embedded in a barotropic environment, so it doesn't have those really strong westerlies in the mid and upper troposphere, and that's why these supercells wrap around from east to west, wrapping around the center as well. So you can definitely see why it's the front right quadrant of these tropical cyclones that will have the greatest tornado potential. And you can also see a lot of surface-based instability coming in from the backside of this storm right over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Those warm waters are at 31 degrees Celsius, but here's a lot of that instability that's really just feeding the storm, but a lot of that's because an elevated mix layer or a little dry slot is now coming over those very warm waters. You have a lot of moisture as well out there. So that's what's feeding these feeder bands that are streaming right into the Corpus area. And you've got those flash flood warnings that are in effect. So let's go back and look at that storm that's coming in to Oakville right now. Very strong rotation. I'm not seeing a very organized debris signature right now, but it does have a strong velocity couplet. And thankfully the velocity is starting to weaken a little bit, but you can see that little pop in the storm relative inflow. That signifies a likely quick tornado, quick tropical cyclone tornado as it's headed toward Oakville. This circulation is likely going to be rewarned as it's starting to head into the western edge of that tornado warning. Watch out, areas like Pettis, Tulsita could also be in the path of that tornado. Toleda also, as this thing will probably resume more of a southwesterly storm motion toward Toleda to the north of Normanna. But definitely do have 3 tornado warnings in effect. This one's really intensifying to the north of Freer. So this one has my eye north of Freer, Texas as well. Look at that. You can definitely see a classic supercell shape in there. A little bit of a rain blob right near the mesocyclone as well, as often happens with these tropical cyclone-induced tornadoes. But this is to the north of Freer. And thank you, new Team Dominator members, for joining us after our live stream of Tropical Storm Hillary out here in Southern California. We have a Team Dominator. We do a lot of these live in-depth briefings where I kind of break down photographs, kinematics, QTs as well, and the upper level setups from a storm chaser perspective. Well, look at that, to the east of Oakville and Three Rivers. And this is to the north of George West, which is a pretty significant town out there as well. Very populated area. So I do think this tornado potential is going to persist as this basically an effective surface low, a tropical cyclone that's already inland, is just going to keep on racing off to the west. If this tropical cyclone had any more time over the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, it likely would have strengthened into a hurricane. The Gulf of Mexico waters right now are about 31 degrees Celsius. And there are a lot of other disturbances as well out in the Atlantic. And it looks like a Central American gyre is also going to come across the Central America and then emerge over the warm waters of the Caribbean Sea. And that could also cause some big problems. But there you can see Harold. That's made landfall. We've got to watch out for Franklin, which could intensify as it approaches Hispaniola. There's a lot of warm water down in the Caribbean. And Franklin, after it crosses Hispaniola, actually could bend back toward the eastern U.S. as potentially even a major hurricane over the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. And we're also watching the Central American gyre. A lot of times those will blossom into very intense hurricanes, either on the eastern tropical Pacific side or on the Caribbean side. And some of the models are showing this one possibly even heading into the Gulf of Mexico. Portions of the eastern Gulf of Mexico need to watch out for that disturbance as well. But in the near term, we've got Franklin that's going to head over Hispaniola and might even start to bend back toward North America, toward the eastern seaboard of the United States. We'll have to keep an eye on that. The Bermuda High is consolidated and off to the east, which should encourage most of these to recurve. But you also have this dominant high pressure too. It's focused over the central United States. And that's what Harold is going around the southern periphery of. That's eventually going to head toward Arizona and could lead to an uptick in the monsoon over portions of Arizona. A great place to track these tropical systems is on tropicaltidbits.com. Dr. Levi Cohen is a great one out there. Definitely knows his stuff. And here's Franklin, the intensity guidance. And look at that. It definitely is going to be ramping up. Potentially could even become a major hurricane. As that, and it could have a bend back toward the eastern seaboard a little bit, but it looks like a majority of the models curve that thing back out to sea, despite a lot of that pull back to the northwest toward the eastern New West. The Bermuda High usually dominates the steering flow with these upper tropical systems. The last 3 years of La Nina, you had the western lobe of that summertime anticyclone that extended over the southeastern U.S. That caused a lot of the tropical cyclones to head into the Gulf of Mexico. But boy, we still got to keep an eye on this on the eastern seaboard, but it does look like, despite that bend back to the northwest, that it does kind of resume its curvature back out to sea. You can look at some of these ensembles as well, and it does have that teaser as it goes off to the northwest, but then eventually should wrap around the Bermuda High a little bit and stay out to sea. Watch out in Bermuda, though. Bermuda could be impacted by a pretty significant hurricane. I might have to actually go out to Bermuda and check that one out as well. And Harold, here it is. Here's the satellite imagery of Harold as it came in, and you can actually see that intensification process that happened on approach to southern Texas. Look at those big cloud tops right there. Still is holding its own, even over interior Texas. A lot of times these tropical cyclones will do that. And look at the big feeder band that's out over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. That's going to continue that flash flooding threat into Corpus Christi, maybe even an isolated tornado or two, water spouts, but the core of Harold definitely intensified just as it was making landfall in South Texas. Look at that thing, just spiraling cyclonically. Move it off to the west-northwest through southern Texas. It'll probably lead to more flooding too across northern Mexico, and then eventually it's going to head toward Arizona again. And the aircraft Recon, the hurricane hunters, measured a central pressure that dropped down to 1,000 millibars just before making landfall. There's Gert, a bit of a bird fart out over the open Atlantic. That's not going to be an issue at all. We got to keep an eye out, though, on that Central American gyre. I'll do some more updates later on, but that certainly could be an issue, too. This is the GFS that, look at Harold, head through northern Mexico, and then eventually arriving there in southern Arizona. That's going to lead to more flood potential. Southwestern New Mexico, northern Mexico could also get some flooding potential. There you can see Franklin moving a boot. And then we got to watch the Gulf of Mexico for that Central American gyre. The European ensembles show that, but we'll just have to see. It's around early September, I believe, is when that could potentially be in the eastern Gulf of Mexico, but we just kind of have to keep an eye on these models. The good thing about tornadoes is that, or about hurricanes, is that they move a little bit more slowly. You can kind of track them as they're moving out near the ocean, but these tropical cyclones that are over the Gulf of Mexico always have a tendency to intensify. And now Oakville, that tornadic storm is right in your location. The good news is that it looks like the rotation has weakened on approach to the Oakville area, but still stay in your safe place until this thing rips by at about 50 miles an hour. But it does look like that one has weakened. The mesocyclone to the east of Pettus was not rewarned, even though it still is a bit of a broad mesocyclone to the east of Pettus and Tulsita there. We got a new tornado warning for the one near K-Bar Ranch in Sandia. That one's starting to pull in some inflow out of the northeast as well. You can see that increase in the storm relative inflow. That's getting pulled in there near K-Bar Ranch. The reflectivity is not as impressive, but a lot of times that happens with these tropical systems. So welcome new Team Dominator members. We are breaking this down. I'm about to head back to hang out with Gizmo until the next tropical system comes in. This was the one that was north of Freer that had some pretty good rotation with it. Still an intense mesocyclone on this. This is probably the strongest mesocyclone right now that's anywhere in the outer bands of Tropical Storm Harold. You always got to watch for that increase in the storm relative inflow. Usually that precedes the spin up of these tornadoes. And any area within this band has tornado potential, and probably anything that spikes up its reflectivity is going to end up being warned. You also have this portion of the band that's a little bit tighter to the core, a little bit stronger low-level wind shear. And so we also have to keep an eye out on that. The dangerous portion of that storm is located closer to K-Bar Ranch. You can also see the new flash flood warning that tornadic supercell is embedded within. We also need to watch some of this convection too to the north of Corpus Christi near Odom. Wouldn't be surprised if those eventually get some tornado warnings. And even within this feeder band back behind the tropical cyclone, some of these could also produce some squally conditions, gusts to 50 miles an hour, possibly a rapidly moving landfalling waterspout. What favors these is that it looks like an area of mid-level dry air is wrapping in on the south side of the cyclone, and that's given just a little bit more instability for the feeder band, but the low-level wind shear drops off dramatically when you get behind the low pressure, which is down to the north of Encino. That's where Tropical Storm Harold is located, and you have a lot of dry air that's wrapping around the east side that's really fueling that feeder band through Corpus. Well, right now, Oakville looks the most impressive on radar reflectivity. It looks like it's trying to even cycle a little. Look at that thing ramp up well to the east of Oakville. But thankfully, on approach to Oakville and Three Rivers, it does look like it's weakening. That rotation is definitely over Oakville now. And in fact, it's likely ripping just by Oakville. It's going to pass to the south of Three Rivers. So if you live to the south of Three Rivers, Texas, you definitely want to be in your safe place there. That's a pretty dangerous supercell. And out in these way outer bands, I don't really see these things having big tornado potential. Their low-level wind shear, according to the RAP analysis, really drops off when you get a little bit further out from the core. Usually these tropical cyclones that are getting picked up by the strong southwesterly mid-level flow, those will have a little bit greater tornado potential because they have more deep layer wind shear. They're usually associated with the mid-level clear slot too, so a lot of times those storms will even go bigger. But as this comes ashore, watch out for the flash flooding near Corpus Christi, areas inland. Watch out for tornado potential in this convective band. Also the one out near Oakville and Pettis. Keep an eye out for tornado potential in those. But as those tornado warnings were popping up, I felt it necessary to do an emergency live briefing and also welcome our new Team Dominator members. We're a community here in meteorology where we educate on severe weather, on forecasting, on meteorology too, and how to storm chase yourself. So I'm going to be doing a lot of these briefings in the off season where we really break down how to forecast and developing your own forecasting process. But look at that, there is the circulation that just updated. It is a little bit to the west of Oakville, but the good news is that that mesocyclone is a lot weaker than it was earlier. It looks like it was associated with some big wind there near Oakville, probably lofted some trees into the air. And yes, there is Tropical Storm Harold to the north of Encino, continuing off to the west. It's over land now, so it's lost its energy source, which is the very warm waters of the western Gulf of Mexico. But we'll just continue to track this today. I do have to actually head to the airport shortly, so I wanted to do this quick live update right before I head out and return my rental car. Thankfully, the rental car is in one piece this time. No damage. So I always try to take good care of the rental cars out there, and we were covering the flooding with Tropical Storm Hillary, which definitely check out our video. Brian posted a video yesterday. I know that the audio is a little bit out of balance, so he even wanted me to take the video down. He said he was embarrassed about it and wasn't going to be able to sleep tonight. But I told him it's still got the footage in there and that we should probably just leave it up. But we do have a raw video that's about to be uploaded as well. That just kind of has the natural audio of the chase. And I think I'm going to activate that one too coming up here shortly. But there you can see those 3 tornado warnings. Right where the strongest wind shear is located. There's actually a little bit stronger wind shear in the front right quadrant of this storm. Front's kind of down here, right quadrant's up here because this tropical cyclone is moving east to west. And even though this portion of the band has triggered a lot of tornado warnings. We also need to keep an eye out on this one. And remember, this isn't actually the hook echo there. It's probably some kind of a left split feature, but the hooks are going to be oriented like that. They're pulling an inflow from the northeast. You can see another supercell-like structure to the east of that one, to the east of Pettus. And that's how they're shaped. They pull in their low-level inflow from the northeast. They do have a little bit of storm relative mid-level flow oriented in the other direction as those supercells are moving quite rapidly. They actually have stronger winds just above the ground with these tropical cyclones. That's where the wind maximizes. Really the flight level winds. That you can have some stronger winds too. This one's definitely starting to do oh, we lost the tornado warning on that one, but very heavy rainfall rates in this flash flood zone from San Diego up toward Orange Grove, up toward Odom additionally. So this is Tropical Storm Harold, and I'm going to be heading back out to the Dominator 4, which is out in South Carolina, so I can be a little bit closer to these potential threats, especially that Central American gyre that the European model is showing. That's going to possibly head to the Caribbean and into the eastern Gulf of Mexico. But thank you, new Team Dominator members, for joining forces here. We're going to try to get all 3 Dominators out in the field during next storm season. And I think that right now we're in the middle of flash flood and also tropical cyclone and hurricane season. But I think we're going to be doing a smooth transition into an active fall tornado season, September into October. So thank you, everybody. And remember those 3 most important words: